What would you do if your neighbor kept blocking your driveway every single day and laughed in your face when you asked her to stop? It began on what I thought would be a quiet Tuesday morning. The air was crisp, the sky still pale with the first hints of sunrise, and I stepped out of my front door with a sense of calm that didn't last long. My coffee cup was still warm in my hand when my eyes landed on something that made my jaw tighten. There, stretched arrogantly across the mouth of my driveway, was Karen's shiny silver SUV. At first I froze, thinking maybe she had just stopped. For a moment, maybe she had run inside to grab something quickly. But then I noticed her windows were rolled up, the engine was off, and the car looked like it had been there for hours. I muttered under my breath, annoyed but still hopeful this was a one-time thing. But as I turned to head back inside, I caught sight of her walking across the street toward her house, shopping bags dangling from her arms. She saw me standing there, waiting to leave, and instead of apologizing, she gave me a dismissive little wave as if to say, "Deal with it." At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she really hadn't realized how inconvenient it was. So the next day, when it happened again, I knocked on her door and asked, as politely as I could, if she could please avoid parking across my driveway. She smiled, nodded, and said, "Of course, it won't happen again." But the very next morning, there it was, her SUV planted in the same exact spot. It quickly became clear that this wasn't an accident at all. This was deliberate. Every time I approached her after that, she had some excuse, or worse, a smirk on her face. One morning, I had to leave for an early meeting, and her car was once again blocking me in. I rang her bell, and when she finally came out, she leaned out her window and laughed. "What are you going to do? Call the HOA? I run it!" Her words stung more than I expected. It wasn't just the arrogance, it was the truth behind it. Karen wasn't just my neighbor, she was the president of our homeowners association. That title gave her a sense of invincibility, as if the rules applied to everyone except her. The more I tried to reason with her, the bolder she became. She would block my driveway for longer stretches, sometimes overnight. On a few occasions, I had to park my car down the street, carrying groceries or bags in the rain like a stranger in my own neighborhood. Every time I asked her to stop, she brushed me off with comments like, "Maybe you should get used to it," or, "If you don't like it, maybe this neighborhood isn't for you." She thrived on control, on intimidation, on watching others bend to her will. But it wasn't just me. As I began quietly talking to other neighbors, I realized that Karen had a long history of this kind of behavior. One family told me she fined them for having a child's bicycle left on their porch. Another neighbor confided that Karen had threatened to report them for having the wrong color curtains visible through their window. She seemed to take pleasure in flexing her authority, using the HOA as her personal weapon. Yet when it came to her own actions, she treated the rules like they didn't exist. I began documenting everything. At first it was just snapping a quick photo when I found her car in my driveway. Then it turned into logging dates and times, collecting proof, writing down every exchange we had. Each picture, each note, was like a piece of a puzzle I was slowly building. But even as I gathered evidence, part of me hoped she'd eventually stop on her own. That maybe, just maybe, she'd get bored of her little game and move on. But Karen wasn't that type of person. If anything, my silence only encouraged her. The moment that broke me wasn't even when she laughed at my face. It was when she smirked and said, "You should thank me. I make this neighborhood better." That was when I realized she wasn't just inconsiderate, she was delusional. And worse, she was daring me to fight back. Little did she know, I was about to give her exactly what she asked for. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon, a day I had circled on my calendar for weeks. This wasn't just any Saturday. My parents, who lived out of town, were visiting after nearly a year. My siblings had promised to come with their families, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of excitement that drowned out the usual tension in the neighborhood. I had been preparing for this gathering with the kind of anticipation that makes you double-check every detail. The backyard had been trimmed and decorated with string lights that glowed warmly in the evening breeze. I had scrubbed down the grill until it shone, stocked up on marinated chicken, fresh vegetables, and enough drinks to last the night. The tables were set, music was cued, and I had even bought new lawn chairs so everyone would feel comfortable. But when the time came to welcome my guests, the very first thing they saw wasn't my carefully prepared home, the glowing lights, or the smell of barbecue. No. What greeted them was Karen's oversized SUV, once again sprawled across the entrance to my driveway like a deliberate insult. It wasn't just inconvenient anymore, it was humiliating. My father, a man of principle, who had worked hard his whole life and never tolerated disrespect, noticed immediately. His face turned red as he stepped out of his car and looked at me. "What's this? Why's there a car in your driveway?" he asked, his voice sharp. I felt my stomach twist as I tried to explain, embarrassed that I had to tell him about my ongoing war with Karen. Before I could finish, he shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable. Let me handle this." Without hesitation, he marched across the street and pounded on Karen's door. My heart raced. I wanted to stop him, but part of me also wanted her to finally face someone who wouldn't tolerate her arrogance. After a few moments, the door creaked open and Karen appeared. She looked as though she had been expecting company, not conflict. A glass of red wine was balanced casually in her hand, her hair tied back in a loose bun. She had that smug look on her face that I had come to hate, an expression that said she believed she was above everyone else. "Yes?" she said lazily, taking a slow sip from her glass. My father didn't mince words. "Move your car. You're blocking my son's driveway." She tilted her head, smirked, and replied as if she were the star villain in some soap opera. "It's just one day. You can walk." The audacity of her words stunned not just me, but my entire family who stood nearby, watching. The laughter and light-hearted chatter that should have filled the air turned into uneasy whispers. My mother tugged on my sleeve, whispering, "What is going on here? Why is she saying this?" I could feel my pride crumbling, slipping through, my fingers like sand. This wasn't just a petty inconvenience anymore. Karen had crossed a line. I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "Karen, this is important to me. My family is here. Could you please move your car just this once?" She lowered her wine glass, leaned slightly toward me, and with her eyes locked on mine, she whispered in a low, taunting voice, "Maybe you should learn who's in charge here." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. For weeks, I had endured her arrogance, her deliberate taunts, her constant need to remind everyone she was HOA president. But hearing her reduce me to nothing, in front of my own family, on a day that mattered so much, it lit a fire in me I didn't know existed. I clenched my fists and forced myself to step back. Fighting her now in front of my parents wasn't the answer. She thrived on drama, and if I exploded, she'd use it against me. Instead, I nodded, turned away, and walked back into my house. But inside, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That night, as my family tried to comfort me, I made a silent vow. Enough was enough. Karen wasn't just an inconsiderate neighbor, she was a bully. And like all bullies, she needed to be stopped. For weeks, I had been quietly collecting evidence of her antics, photos of her SUV blocking my driveway at different times of day, videos of her dismissive behavior, and even whispered complaints from neighbors who were too afraid to confront her directly. Now, I put it all together. I opened a folder on my computer and started compiling everything. Dates, times, license plate close-ups, screenshots of text messages I had sent her asking, politely to move her car. It wasn't just a collection anymore, it was a case. By the time midnight rolled around, I had an entire dossier ready. I attached it to an email addressed to the City Parking Enforcement Office, filed a formal complaint with the police department, and drafted another report to send directly to the HOA board, minus Karen. But I didn't stop there. The next day, I went out and bought 2 motion detection cameras. One went above my garage, facing the driveway, the other mounted to a side fence for an alternate angle. Both synced directly to my phone, giving me live alerts anytime movement was detected. No more relying on chance or my own observations. Now, I had hard, undeniable proof every time Karen tried her tricks. I also made a few phone calls. I spoke to a tow company and explained my situation. The man on the other end chuckled knowingly and said, "We've dealt with people like her before. Don't worry, as long as you've got the paperwork, we'll handle it." That reassurance gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. Karen thought she was untouchable because of her title as HOA president. She believed she could bend the rules, laugh at the law, and get away with whatever she pleased. What she didn't realize was that I was no longer playing defense. I was on the offense now. Every move she made was being documented, every word she said was ammunition, and every arrogant smirk only fueled my determination. The stage was set. The trap was ready. All I needed was for Karen's arrogance to get the better of her one more time. And trust me, I knew it wouldn't take long, and I was right. It happened sooner than I expected. Just a week after I had armed myself with evidence, reports, and cameras, Karen struck again. This time she seemed almost theatrical about it. She pulled her SUV across my driveway in broad daylight, headlights shining directly against my garage door, as though she wanted to taunt me. I watched from my living room window, my phone already buzzing with motion alerts from the cameras I had installed. She stepped out of her car, looked directly at my house, and smirked before strolling off toward her front door. It was as if she believed she was invincible, that no matter how many times she pushed me, nothing would happen. But this time, things didn't go the way she planned. Within minutes, the tow truck I had prearranged was backing into the cul-de-sac. The low rumble of its engine drew curious eyes from neighbors who peeked out from their blinds, wondering what was happening. I stepped outside, heart pounding but steady, clutching the paperwork I had filed. The tow driver got out, glanced at Karen's car, then at me, and asked, "This the one?" I handed him the documents, and he nodded. "Say no more." The sound of the tow chain clinking against metal was like music to my ears. As the driver began hooking up Karen's precious SUV, the door across the street flew open. Out came Karen, slippers on her feet, her wine glass still in her hand. She looked around in disbelief before her eyes locked on me. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed, storming across the street. The tow driver, unfazed, continued his work. "Ma'am, your vehicle is in violation of city code. It's being towed." "You can't tow my car. I'm the HOA president," she shrieked, her voice rising into a pitch that turned heads across the neighborhood. I finally spoke, calm and steady. "Actually, Karen, I can. And I did. You've been blocking my driveway for weeks. This is the report I filed with the city, the police, and the HOA board." I held up the folder of evidence, the thick stack of photos and timestamps, the complaints she had ignored. "You're not above the law." Her face twisted into rage. She stomped her foot like a child throwing a tantrum. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." But the tow truck didn't care about her threats. Within minutes, her SUV was lifted, its wheels dangling helplessly as the truck pulled away. The sight was surreal. Karen, who had strutted around this neighborhood as though she owned it, suddenly looked powerless, standing in her slippers with her mouth hanging open as her car disappeared down the street. The reaction from the neighbors was immediate. Some opened their doors and leaned on their porches, watching like it was the most entertaining show they'd seen in years. A few even clapped quietly, nodding in my direction. For once, Karen wasn't the queen of the HOA. She was just another, Neighbor who had gone too far and finally faced the consequences. Later that night, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Karen, her face red with anger. She shoved a piece of paper at me. "You're paying for this. The impound fees, everything. Do you hear me?" I didn't flinch. I simply handed her back the folder I had used earlier. "This is every piece of evidence I have against you. If you come near my property again, the next call I make will be to my lawyer. Do you understand me?" For once, Karen had no smug retort. She snatched the folder back, muttered something under her breath, and stormed off into the night. From that day on, things were different. Karen never parked across my driveway again. She still glared at me when we crossed paths, but the smirk, the arrogance, the untouchable air, those were gone. She had been dethroned, and the rest of the neighborhood knew it too. People who once whispered in fear of her began greeting me, shaking my hand, thanking me for finally standing up to the tyrant who had made their lives miserable. And that's when I realized something powerful. Karen had built her reign on fear and intimidation, but once someone stood up to her, her empire crumbled like it was made of sand. She wasn't untouchable, she was just a bully, and bullies always fall. If you enjoyed this story and want more HOA drama, crazy neighbor tales, and satisfying real-life revenge stories, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join our community. You won't want to miss what's coming next.